is a view of her truthfulness, isn't it?
Correct.
And don't you think that his view of her truthfulness has a much better basis than yours?
He has a much longer history with her, and he has a questionable history with her.
Whether or not he has a questionable history with her, she grew up in his house, didn't she?
She did.
He saw her on a day-to-day basis, right?
He did.
You didn't, did you?
No, I did not.
He dealt with her when she went to school, right?
Correct.
And he dealt with her whenever she had any issues. You did not, right?
Correct.
And he would know better than you whether or not the defendant had a reputation for honesty growing up.
Pardon? Speculation. Overall,
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, did you review his conversation with the detective in which he talked about the defendant's truthfulness after the age of 14?
You may.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to go back to the jury room for approximately 10 minutes. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Please be seated. Court is still in process. Mr. Martinez, you may examine the witness.
Is it prior to how much of a clip this is? Is this the entire interview, or are we just going to hear part of it?
9 seconds.
I would ask for more information so that Ms. Levilat can put it in her.
All right, Mr. Martinez.
He wants more information. Do I need to address the issue of more information?
Yes, please. Conversation with this witness.
With regard to this particular case, ma'am, the truthfulness of the defendant is important to you, right?
Correct.
And in fact, you spent 44 hours with her, correct?
Correct.
And in part, whether it's a small or a large part, in part, your opinion is based on what the defendant told you, correct?
Correct.
And then you went out and you corroborated what the defendant told you in an effort to see whether or not she was being truthful, correct?
Yeah, and some prior to meeting with her.
And in fact, yesterday when we talked about it, you told us yesterday that yes, you believe the defendant was untruthful, but her untruthfulness was after the murder. Do you remember telling me that yesterday?
Her pattern of untruthfulness.
Right,
Yes.
was after the murder, correct?
Yes.
And that I asked you specifically about before the murder, and you said you didn't see any indications that she was untruthful, correct?
With her prior boyfriends.
With anything. Remember, you told us that we talked about whether
I didn't have any evidence. I didn't see anything.
that she was untruthful, correct?
Correct.
But you are aware that there was an interview between her and between her father and the detective, Steve Flores, correct?
I didn't have that information.
So you didn't have that information. But if there is information out there from her father that indicated that the defendant was...
Objection, Judge, may we approach?
You may.
mark this as an exhibit there. Exhibit 604.
She's never been honest with us since then. And she was with, only 14 then.
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't.
All right, let's play it again.
She's never been honest with us since then. And she was with, only 14 then.
Did you hear him say, she hasn't been honest with us since then, and she was 14? Did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
With regard to this particular case, this is not something that you knew when you testified yesterday, correct?
No, it is not something I knew.
Pardon?
No, it is not something I knew.
Isn't this something that you would have wanted to consider in deciding whether or not the defendant was being, whether or not you were going to believe the defendant in this particular case?
Objection, Judge, it would be inappropriate to ask the witness this without context to the entire interview.
This is outside the presence of the jury. You may answer the question.
Well, I would not take a sound bite of anything and make a decision on it. So I'd want to hear the whole tape, and I'd also want to put in perspective the things I'd heard about Mr. Arias, and I'd want to put into perspective what I know about teenagers.
But my question to you is, the fact that this person, her father, is saying that she hasn't been honest since the age of 14.
Sustained.
Well, let's hear it again, okay? Then I'll ask you a question.
She's never been honest with us since then. And she was with, only 14 then.
Did you hear what he said?
Yes, I did.
He said she's never been honest with us since then, right?
Right.
And he also said she was 14, correct?
Correct.
Isn't that go contrary? Doesn't that fly in the face of what you just testified to yesterday, that she was always honest before the killing?
It doesn't fly in the face until I've assessed it. I need to find out. The information I had, I didn't have information that she had lied. When you get information from a parent that a child lies to them during teenage years, that does not necessarily characterize someone as a liar or not. And so I would want to take that into account with the information I had that was regarding Mr. Arias as well, and his rationale for perhaps for the reason that she did lie to him.
What you're saying is that you would consider it and then you would explain this statement.
I would consider it, and then I would decide what I was going to do with it once it was considered.
Right. And it would be part of the file then, right? That's something you would consider then, right?
Yes, it would.
I don't have anything else.
Wilmot, did you have any questions on this issue?
Not until she is able to have a better context of what this is actually about. I'd like to be able to either see the entire interview.
All right, Counsel Tuck. Mr. Martinez, are you ready?
Oh, yes, I am, thank you.
All right, we'll bring him